Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Milwaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. After years in Milwaukee, a teacher's aide was forced to leave the country. Today, we'll learn how she and her family are adjusting. Then, in a new Capitol Notes, we'll learn how the state Supreme Court is addressing challenges to the state's congressional voting maps.
Basie argues that these maps have so insulated the incumbents from a challenge that it violates the Constitution. The other is that it's such a partisan gerrymander that it violates the Constitution.
Plus, we'll learn about a new affordable housing complex in Milwaukee.
The city as a whole is growing, and I want to see our population continue to grow. And if we want to be a first-class city, a large city, we need to have those units available for everybody.
All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. Last summer, a woman working as a teacher's aide at a public school in Milwaukee was forced to self-deport to her native country of El Salvador. Yessenia Ruano and her husband Miguel Guerra chose uncertain safety over the constant fear of detainment after a decade-old deportation order for Yessenia rose to the surface. Immigration officials did not honor her pending application for a visa reserved for trafficking victims. Now, the couple and their young twin daughters are trying to create a new life in a country that feels foreign to all four of them. Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reporter Sophie Carson visited the family in their new home in San Alfonso, El Salvador. Carson joins WUWM education reporter Catherine Kokel to share her reporting.
So it's been 6 months now that Yessenia and her daughters, Paola and Elizabeth, have been living in El Salvador. Her husband, Miguel, left his job in Milwaukee and joined them a few months later. Can you tell me what their new life is like in El Salvador?
Yeah, it's very different from their life in Milwaukee. That was something I really wanted to find out when I went there. It's different in many ways. The family just doesn't have the level of sort of independence they had previously. They own their home. Yessenia and Miguel were working. The girls were going to school. They kept their evenings busy. In the story I write, they went to trampoline parks. They went to the playground. They went to dance class. And the girls were very active, in school. And Yessenia was very active in her church. But now they first lived with Yessenia's mother in the mountains, in a rural mountain village. And now they live closer to the coast with Miguel's mother, her mother-in-law. They live in just one room, the four of them in one room, 3 twin beds pushed together. It's very hot in the house, but that room has air conditioning. And so the girls will start school when the school year starts in January in El Salvador. It's a 4-hour school day. The girls finished 4th grade in Milwaukee, but they really are kind of going in blind to this new school year. They don't know much about Salvadoran history or geography, and they speak Spanish. They went to a bilingual school in Milwaukee where Yessenia was also a teacher's aide called Alba, but the whole world is different for them in many ways. So Yessenia is currently working at a convenience store that is kind of attached to her mother-in-law's home. And she and Miguel are taking a pastry course that's offered for free by the government for returning Salvadorans who were deported. So they are, trying to figure out what their next steps are and trying to figure out how to kind of rebuild their lives.
Yeah. You write that their life now is a series of contradictions. Can you share a little bit about what that means?
I think that the country in general is undergoing this really interesting transition where there is, a big wealth disparity. There is a lot of foreign investment and foreign tourism coming into the country. At the same time, much of the country is still, developing. It's still incredibly poor. Still recovering from the effects of its long civil war and, rampant gang violence. It's something that is a real interesting contradiction. At the same time, we spoke to a local reporter there who said, the government just opened a free hospital for pets, a free animal hospital. And he said, there's this really interesting issue where regular Salvadoran humans can't get the healthcare they need, but they're opening a free hospital for pets. And so it's there's the currency there is US dollars and Bitcoin. They're really rapidly evolving. There's a lot of foreign tourism. The hostel we were staying at, which is owned by Yessenia's aunt and uncle, we had a Swiss woman stay there who's been coming for a number of years. And Yessenia's cousin is a surf instructor who teaches surfing to, tourists, foreign tourists. So there's a lot of mix of, developing and developed, and that I think for Yessenia and Miguel is a really interesting thing to come back into.
I think people make a similar observations when they talk about the haves and have-nots being within spitting distance of each other. And Yessenia and Miguel kind of represent this group of people who were haves, right? They moved to the U.S. You shared that they sent money back to family members in El Salvador. And now they are in a place where they're getting boxes of their belongings from their home in Milwaukee, and they don't even have a place to put them. They are completely useless to them. An ice cream maker, it was an example that you included in the piece. It's fitting a life from the U.S. into their new lives in El Salvador that I would argue they didn't want. They didn't want to return to the country that they were both born in, right?
They didn't. They talked about that, they were like, this wasn't our choice. These boxes, had arrived right as I got there. So it was a really interesting sort of symbol for me of going through what their life was and also learning to sort of accept or fit these bits of their American lives into their new life. So I kind of got lucky in that regard. That was a good symbol, but it was also just practically a real challenge for them. Like I said, they're living in one small room in their in her mother-in-law's house, and there's a lot of other people living in that house, and there just was no room for this. So they really are just step by step figuring it out, and I think they were really the reason I'm telling their story is because it's representative of what many other people are going through. So it's not that they specifically are the only ones going through this, but I think there's many people who are going through things like this.
There's a lot of reporting in the U.S. right now about what happens before someone leaves the country, right? We're seeing these images of people being detained when they're coming to court appearances. We see people being, hustled into vans in places like Home Depot parking lots. There's a lot of reporting and kind of access to people who are being removed from the country. There's not a lot of reporting about what it's like after someone leaves the United States. Why was it important to tell this story now?
I think that you make a very good point. There was not a lot of reporting, and I still have not seen very much reporting, in depth about what it's like to be back. I think in the U.S., I understand why. We're very focused on our policies, how our taxpayer dollars are being used to fund ICE operations or federal agencies. But from just a human perspective, I was really interested in her story. She's a very compelling person in that she's very friendly. She's incredibly hopeful. Even now, she's hopeful that she can return to the U.S. And her story, I think, struck a chord in Milwaukee because she was this person who had no criminal convictions. She had, U.S. citizen children. She was working in a public school legally, so there was a lot of community support for her. And so, as we were kind of thinking about, how do you tell her story next? It just made sense to try to go, and it was a long shot, but being with someone day in and day out, you can really see the rhythm of their lives and sort of how they're adjusting, how they're making do, and that is something you can't really get over, say, a Zoom call or a phone call. So I just kept in touch with her since she left, as well as her other friends have done the same. Her church community, her teacher friends, everyone's really kept in touch with her. And so it's been interesting to be able to keep telling that story.
If you're just joining us, today we're hearing from Sophie Carson, a reporter at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. She recently traveled to El Salvador, where she met with Yessenia Ruano. She's a former Milwaukee Public Schools teaching aide who was forced to carry out her own deportation of her and her two 10-year-old daughters earlier this year. There's still a lot of hurt in this family, though. I mean, you chronicle it throughout the several stories that you put together for this project, and it also seems like Yessenia and Miguel are very torn on what their future looks like and how to move forward. You mentioned that Yessenia is very hopeful, but how does that show up? How do they disagree on what their lives should and will look like?
I think this is one of the, central tensions that I hope to convey in this story, which was that, Miguel, he was under the radar in the U.S. He didn't have papers, and he was working in Milwaukee, but, he has accepted the reality that he's back in El Salvador. I mean, he says she's not defeated. And when I spoke to him about that, she was in the other room, and I asked her the next day, and are you defeated? And she said, well, no, I see the reality. I'm trying to accept it, but it's very difficult. I mean, life here is very difficult. And she also has this ongoing federal lawsuit regarding her T visa, her trafficking victims visa, through a California immigration advocacy group. And she that lawsuit argues that her deportation should have not happened and that it was illegal to deport her with this ongoing application. She still holds out a little bit of hope that will result in her being able to come back to the U.S. At the same time, she can't just sit around and wait for that, She has to keep living her life. She has to keep going to the grocery store and coming up with a new way to earn a living and taking her, entertaining her children and keeping them occupied and all this stuff. How do you fill a day when you're not in school and you're not working? And, they're really just trying to figure out how to build their lives. And for Yessenia, at the same time, she's still struggling to accept that new reality.
You mentioned that she doesn't have any criminal convictions. We've heard kind of over and over again that the Trump administration is going after people who represent, quote, the worst of the worst. She doesn't really seem to fit that bill. What does her story mean in the context of this greater immigration crackdown?
It's a great question. I think her story is really representative of, many of the people who have been targeted and forced to leave the country under Trump's expanded deportation crackdown. We hear a lot about the worst of the worst. We hear a lot about the people with criminal convictions or violent criminal records. Yessenia was not one of those people, and she was not even charged with illegal reentry. She did cross the border twice. She was not charged with illegal reentry on her second entry because she said she had a fear of returning to El Salvador. So she spent pretty much 14 years, her entire time in the U.S., waiting for a decision in her cases to be able to hopefully earn a legal status and stay in the U.S. So, when I spoke to her friends in Milwaukee, what they said was she really was representative of the kind of complex process that many immigrants go through in trying to gain a legal status, trying to remain in the U.S., trying to make it work. And that, when we hear about, well, why didn't she just come the right way? Or she had 14 years to become a U.S. citizen. Why didn't that happen? They really said this was a big misunderstanding of just how complicated this process is and how, in many cases, it's actually impossible for people in situations like hers to gain a legal status.
Yeah, when you say do it the right way, that is interesting to me. We at WUWM are in the process of releasing a podcast called Status Pending, where we are looking at all of the different ways that people can gain access to citizenship or not in many cases. We have episodes about refugees and asylum seekers, as well as people who use the family pathways. And the kind of common thread among this podcast is that this is an incredibly expensive process and it takes a really long time and you're kind of in limbo for a really long time. And so it sounds like, in those 14 years that she was in the country, it is not as easy as people may think when they say you should do it the right way.
Yes, the gist is that her case is representative of this, many of the people swept up in the larger Trump deportation crackdown. And also, she was one of few people who's been willing to speak out about it. One of few immigrants who's been, really prominently willing to share her story and be open and transparent about what happened and how she got to where she is.
That was Journal Sentinel reporter Sophie Carson, speaking with WUWM education reporter Catherine Kokel. Carson, along with photographer Giovanni Hernandez, reported on a Milwaukee teacher's aide who was forced to deport to El Salvador.
This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com. Hi, J.R. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'd like to start with the possibility for congressional redistricting in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Supreme Court appointed separate 3-judge panels to hear 2 lawsuits seeking new congressional lines. To remind people, there are 8 congressional districts in Wisconsin. Currently, 6 members of Congress are Republicans, 2 of them are Democrats, and in the districts that include Milwaukee and Madison, that's where the Democrats are, they've been working for more even numbers around the state. What can you tell us about these developments?
Well, it's unlikely. People have told me that there'll be a new map in time for 2026, and so some people have an eye on 2028. So let's kind of look at what's going on here. So Republicans in 2011 wrote a state law that said if there is a challenge to a district, the Supreme Court, file that circuit court, notify the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will then appoint a 3-judge panel, make up a circuit court judges to hear that case. The Supreme Court received these requests months ago. All right, for Thanksgiving, issued orders creating 3-judge panels and saying, okay, you guys are going to hear these challenges. One is that it is an anti-competitive gerrymander. It's a new theory. It hasn't been tested in court before. Basically argues that these maps have so insulated the incumbents from a challenge that it violates the Constitution. The other is that it's such a partisan gerrymander that it violates the Constitution. Now, heard from conservatives, some who are upset about this decision and think that Supreme Court is like hell-bent on getting new maps in place for 2026. But it doesn't really look like that's likely. And remember, too, the Supreme Court rejected 3 previous lawsuits asking to draw new maps filed between 2024 and this summer. This one is unique because this different path it's taking, asking the court to use this never-used-before process, this 2011 law. So where do we go from here? Well, the partisan gerrymander lawsuit, those folks, they want a quick timetable. They want the court to act, these 3-judge panel to act like right away. They want a map. They're trying to get that moving. The anti-competitive gerrymander people, they're a little bit more of, this is going to be a long-term process because you have to have a trial. You're going to have testimony from experts. You're going to have briefs to really make your case for this argument. So it looks like it's going to take a while. Oh, by the way, the Elections Commission has said in multiple lawsuits like this that whatever you do, they need a map by about March 1st-ish. Because you can circulate nomination papers in mid-April in Wisconsin, run for the fall elections. It is unlikely you can complete a trial and get a decision and a new map by March 1st. So I'm not thinking from my conversations we're going to see something new by next fall, but you might see something in 2028. Oh, don't forget, even the state Supreme Court and the 3-judge panel, even if they move at like lightning speed in Wisconsin and decide there's going to be a new map and they go through the appeals process, all wrap it up by March 1st. Republicans can still go to the U.S. Supreme Court, argue that this shouldn't happen. So I guess what I'm getting at is, yeah, the wheels are in motion. It might take a while, for this to happen, that you might see a new map in Wisconsin drawn by a court.
And I'm imagining it's hard to distill into a nutshell, but what's the difference between the partisan gerrymander argument and the anti-competitive gerrymandering arguments? Like, really, what's the line there?
Basically, the motivation for why the maps are drawn. So with the partisan gerrymander, they're going to argue that these maps are drawn to create an advantage for Republicans. And that's why you have a 6-2 Republican majority. Now, we've had other lawsuits filed against these maps because essentially the map we have right now is based off of one drawn in 2011 by Republicans in a full control of the legislature. Remember, the state Supreme Court stepped in because Democratic Governor Tony Evers, Republican lawmakers couldn't agree on maps after the last round of the census. So the court drew this map, and they told people, you must take a least change approach to what Republicans drew in 2011, these new maps. They picked the Evers map, again, using those parameters, and that's where we're at right now. That 2011 map was challenged in court, and there's testimony that shows that the people who drew that map or involved in it weren't really trying to create a partisan advantage. Yeah, there's testimony that Sean Duffy, for example, up in northern Wisconsin at the time, he wants the district to be more Republican. But a lot of it was more about convenience for the members of the delegation. They had bipartisan input, and they addressed concerns like Tammy Baldwin, for example, was in Congress at the time. She wanted to make sure she could drive her whole district in a day and meet constituents. So that was more the testimony from back then. It may be a tough bar maybe to argue the intent was a partisan gerrymander. The anti-competitive gerrymander, that argument is these were drawn to basically protect the incumbents from a true challenge. If you look at the map we have right now, the 3rd district in western Wisconsin, that can be competitive. That one has flipped hands in recent years. The rest of them are double-digit margins almost every time. Now, the 1st, which is in southeastern Wisconsin, that can be competitive. And the power incumbency has helped Brian Stiles sometimes. He has faced very well-financed challengers at times. But Tony Evers, in running for election as governor in 2022, he, I believe, came within 500 some votes of beating Tim Michels in the 1st. So it can be competitive, but typically speaking, these districts are not very competitive. And that's the crux of their argument. It was drawn to protect the incumbents, and that's unconstitutional. But again, new theory, never been used before in Wisconsin courts.
This is Capital Notes. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com. Sticking with this congressional redistricting, what's the national picture for Wisconsin? How are people looking at Wisconsin to play a role in any attempts to win Democratic control of any of the houses in Congress?
That were kind of a long shot. I mean, if you look at the states really matter, I mean, there's stuff happening, in a handful of states right now. We got the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that Texas can use its gerrymandered map. They kind of signaled that decision that California can use its gerrymandered map for Democrats. So we're not really in that picture so much. We're going to pick up. For Democrats, if you did get a new map, it'd be a bonus, but they're not counting on us having a new map by next fall.
We'll stick with the Wisconsin Supreme Court. It agreed to take a case last week from the ACLU and immigrants' rights group Voces de la Frontera. They're arguing that Wisconsin jails honoring ICE detainers is illegal. The petition names 5 Wisconsin County Sheriff's offices, Walworth, Brown, Kenosha, Sauk, and Marathon as respondents. What can you tell us about this case?
So really interesting. It's a petition for original action, which means that they're going to the Supreme Court first without going to the circuit court level and the other appellate process. There are critics who are conservative who think the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, the liberal majority, is really acting in a partisan fashion, is doing all kinds of things to benefit liberals. And, let's be honest, the liberal majority has sided with liberals more often than not. But they've also passed on some high-profile cases in terms of taking original action. For example, there was a lawsuit about the legality of the school choice system that was upheld by the Supreme Court like 30 years ago. There's a new lawsuit filed seeking to try and reverse that, and the court said, no, we're not going to take that on original action. So I'm kind of curious why the court decided this is a good one to take, because they've passed in other, high-profile cases like this. And when you go original action to the Supreme Court, you skip that lower court level. And at the lower court, circuit court especially, you develop the record. You get more facts in the record. You have a trial. You get testimony. It helps the foundation of the case. Sometimes you don't do that. You don't get as voluminous of a background on what's going on. And this is kind of an interesting decision. So I'm kind of curious why the court picked this one, but not these other liberal issues to take up. Why is this the one they wanted to dive into without going to the lower courts first?
To remind people, an ICE detainer is a voluntary request to a local sheriff to hold individuals for an additional 48 hours after they should have been released under state law so that ICE can take custody of them and deport them. And this lawsuit contends that Wisconsin law enforcement doesn't have the authority to make arrests based solely on those civil administrative warrants. Is that what you're understanding as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting case. I mean, there's obviously all kinds of legal questions, but also some political overtones too. I mean, let's face it, there's an election next year. Immigration is a hot topic. It's an interesting one for the court to dive into in that environment.
And moving on to another issue before lawmakers, Republican legislative leaders, and the governor's office have discussed passing a measure that would basically protect the state from being penalized tens of millions of dollars each year for dealing with SNAP benefits and the recent tax and spending bill that Congress passed. What's that all about?
So, as they call it, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act changed a couple things about SNAP. One, for a long time, the administrative costs have been split evenly between the state and the federal government. The bill has changed that. The law has changed that now to be a 75% state, 25% feds system. So one, we need to allocate more money just to administer it. Two, there's a thing called an error rate. So obviously when people are on the program, you have to make sure they're eligible. And the state already does checks for that. Our error rate in 24 was 4.5%. We won't know the 2025 one until like June, but you're supposed to stay below 6% going forward. Otherwise, if you go above 6% for your error rate, i.e. paying people who shouldn't be getting these benefits, you begin to have to pay more of the cost yourself. And the penalty rises the higher your error rate is. The Department of Health Services has asked for 56 new employees to help do these checks to ensure Wisconsin doesn't go above that error rate. So you got to address this at some point, especially move the money around for the administrative costs. There's been talk about coming in extraordinary session, which is lawmakers aren't supposed to be in. They come in anyway. They call themselves back to take up a bill. For the end of the year, they could do it early next year if they wanted to. But I'm watching that and how they would do it because there's been talk of there's a bill right now that would ban using SNAP to buy soda and candy, essentially. There's been some talk about attaching this funding fix and these positions to that bill to then give Republicans a quote-unquote win on it because, they want some change of SNAP program. They recognize that, hey, we've got to, shoulder more of the administrative costs. We also want to make sure we don't go above the error rate and you start getting penalized, but they want something else. Like they want some changes. So that might be one way you get a compromise where Governor Evers and his administration get the positions they want and the money moved, and Republicans get some kind of a, something they want, such as, again, a ban on soda and candy being purchased with SNAP benefits.
All right, a lot to watch for here. Thanks for the analysis, JR, and thanks for joining me on Capitol Notes.
Anytime.
Just like Capitol Notes, Lake Effect is also a podcast. Search for Lake Effect wherever you get your podcasts to listen on demand. In about 10 minutes, we'll speak with a local music influencer about how she went from posting music recommendations on YouTube to having her own show on Sirius XM. But first, we'll learn about a new affordable housing complex coming to Milwaukee's Bayview neighborhood. That's coming up next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. Communities throughout the U.S. are grappling with the nation's affordable housing crisis. WUWM is examining systemic housing problems and solutions in our series called Seeking Solutions: Keys to Home Ownership. The Corliss is a new affordable housing development in Milwaukee's Bayview neighborhood. It's a nearly $200 million investment that offers over 500 affordable rental units. The property consists of 8 buildings at the site of a former landfill on First and Beecher. District 14 Alderwoman Marina Dmitrievich joins WUWM's Eddie Morales to talk about how the project addresses housing challenges.
This is one part of the housing spectrum, right? We need to make sure that people have stable incomes, higher wages. We also need to be sure that we're preventing homelessness. I have 2 or 3 very large homeless encampments in my district off of Rosedale, near Chase Avenue. We have people being evicted at too high of a rate. So there's still much, much work to do, but this puts us on the right path.
The project aims to address problems like resident displacement, rising costs, and keeping aging residents in place.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the scale of those concerns and how much of an impact that city officials hope the Corliss will have?
Definitely. Just like many cities across the United States, affordable housing is still something we're really struggling with. We, as the city of Milwaukee, are thousands of units under what we need for a city our size when it comes to affordability. And it's one of the top things I hear, especially in my community. So this is a way to chip away at what is a very large scale problem. And speaking of scale, this is a pretty large scale project. It's just under 600 units. And every unit is affordable, meaning that it'll be somewhat income-based. And there is specifically over 100 units dedicated for older adults who want to age in place. So this is quite the right step in the right direction on what I do think will be kind of a long, worthwhile journey to making our city more affordable and accessible for everybody.
Are there any specific anecdotes or stories that you've heard from residents about, wanting to age in place or affordable housing that has really resonated with you throughout this process?
There's 2 in particular that I've heard frequently. In my district, in the Southside Bayview area, we're really known. I think one of the more attractive pieces to our neighborhood is our amazing public school system that we have. And we have some outstanding public Montessori schools. And I often hear that parents love living in the area and walking to school with their kids. But at the same time, there's this kind of inequity that some teachers and staff and people can't even afford to live in that same community in which they're working in. And I think that's what we see often, especially in the Bayview area, as it becomes more popular and unaffordable. And then kind of on the other side of that, at least age spectrum, is I hear very frequently, Marina, I've lived in Bayview in the South Side my whole life. I've paid off my mortgage. I love being here and everything's changing for the positive, but I just can't afford to stay here. I mean, I even have some people that are renting out parts of their houses just to stay up and stay up to date on bills. So I think, some older adults want smaller living quarters. That's easier to be more independent. And this really meets that need.
So during the recent grand opening, it was mentioned that community feedback really shaped every step of the project. What requests or suggestions did people have? How did that shape the project?
It was a long process of multi-years. It was actually right when I got elected. And, the area has a lot of historic relevance. Part of it was a former landfill. And so the project changed along the way. They were going to preserve some of the historic buildings, and then that changed because it was tough to use the structure. But they did reuse the Cream City brick. If you go and visit it, you'll see it's absolutely gorgeous. It's also better for the environment. But they made some changes to materials, and 2 significant changes that came directly from the community were keeping the public bike path that will now go through it. It's actually an enhancement. And probably the largest one is the 100 and I think it's 44 or at least over 140 units that will be specifically designed and dedicated for older adults. The community said that they really wanted some of this affordability to be carved out for older adults. So those were directly from the community in many of the community meetings that I led.
Yeah, and there are some other amenities in the space. Can you describe some of those other aspects of the property?
Yes, I've toured it now twice. It's absolutely beautiful. It's very well done. I saw a community room, and then one of the areas that I saw was a community yoga room and space that had all the equipment there. I saw a workout facility. I know there's a little dog area, just amenities that people deserve that are important and that add to quality of life. So I'm excited to see what happens around there. There's already been developers interested in the land nearby. And with this type of density, I mean, it will be thousands of people, right? When you have nearly 600 units. I believe that these people And these residents are first and foremost welcome. They will stimulate our local economy, both by, eating and drinking coffee and all that good stuff. And possibly it could help our workforce, because we do need more employees to help with our thriving economy in the neighborhood.
The Corliss is the largest private affordable housing development ever in Wisconsin. How was this project funded and supported?
So obviously the developer put in a significant amount of private money. I know there were WIDA tax credits from the state of Wisconsin. A representative spoke about that. There were private, lenders and funders. They were at the ribbon cutting. And then the city of Milwaukee used the few tools that we had, which was tax incremental financing, brownfield redevelopment through Rackham, the redevelopment authority, and then the Housing Trust Fund. So we pretty much put every tool that we have locally forward. And I believe when you put in that type of an input, you get a significant output. I mean, the return on the investment for affordable units is 100%. So that is very exciting.
What other affordable housing gaps does the city need to fill? Are there any specific districts that should be prioritized or that come to mind?
Personally, I think it should be every district. I mean, for me, significantly, this is an area that I wanted to make sure that during my tenure as alderperson that we were welcoming and inclusive. We've had some really high trends towards, lack of affordability, even moving towards displacement and gentrification. So I think this changes that trajectory. I think we can show that if we can do it in this district, we should be able to do it anywhere that there's other, local support. But, the city as a whole is growing, and I want to see our population continue to grow. And if we want to be a first-class city, a large city, we need to have those units available for everybody. And so I think this is a priority. I know it's a priority of my colleagues as well. And we just need to be re-examining space and looking at the tools that we have to replicate this type of development.
How does the city of Milwaukee compare to other cities when it comes to these issues?
Unfortunately, I think we're in a similar situation. I think it's a national problem. I think that we do need some national and federal solutions, and we're doing the best we can, but it does trickle down to the local level. I like to point to this project and show that when all the tools are used to kind of tackle the crisis of affordability, we can build these large scale projects when everything lines up. And honestly, we need a couple more of these throughout the city of Milwaukee. If we want to continue to be a city that grows and thrives, where everybody can thrive, not just a few.
That was District 14 Alderwoman Marina Dmitrievich speaking with WUWM's Eddie Morales. That story was part of our series Seeking Solutions, Keys to Home Ownership. Support for the series comes from presenting sponsor Educators Credit Union. You can find all of our coverage at wuwm.com/housing. Coming up next, we'll hear from local music influencer The Yellow Button in the latest episode of our Internet Culture podcast, Milwaukee Based. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. If you're chronically online and an indie music fan, you may have encountered the Yellow Button. She gained a following during the pandemic by sharing music recommendations on TikTok. And she's built a tight-knit online community through her Twitch stream and radio show on Sirius XM. She joins WUWM's Graham Thomas and Samia Saeed for Episode 3 of Milwaukee Based, WUWM's Internet Culture podcast, to talk about her influencer journey and today's music landscape.
Well, Kelsey, the Yellow Button, welcome to Milwaukee Based.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in. So for our listeners, I want to begin by just getting some background. So how did you kind of get your start as a playlist curator, music recommender, Twitch streamer, etc.?
I feel like it was a lot of luck that happened. I was just posting random YouTube videos in like 2016 for fun, and I had a little community on Tumblr back in the day. And we would always just like share music and stuff like that on YouTube and Tumblr. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, why don't I kind of bring that aspect over to TikTok? Because everyone was on TikTok and just bored. So I just started posting random music stuff about pop punk and Midwest emo back in the day. And all of a sudden it just blew up out of nowhere. I had like 50,000 followers within a few days, which was kind of crazy.
Okay.
And then from there, it just kind of spiraled into where I am now, just like doing Sirius XM and been on Audio Tree. I stream on Twitch now. Just like it's all over the board, and it's so much fun.
How did the Sirius XM thing come about? That's really exciting.
That was also another super random thing. I think it happened because I was posting so much of doing like college radio online. And since I had the Yellow Button platform and just sharing that I also did that, kind of gave me that gateway into doing something bigger than college radio. And one day I just had someone from SiriusXM reach out and they're like, hey, we like what you do. Would you like to host a weekly show? And I was like, SiriusXM? I was like, okay, I would love to. And I've been doing it the past, I think this month marks a whole year of me doing SiriusXM, and I'm going to be doing it a whole nother year coming forward. So
I feel like there's a lot of like college radio kids out there who are like, oh my God, what Kelsey does is just like my dream to like make playlists, recommend music for any college radio kids out there. What would you tell them for like how to do what you do?
Yeah. I would just say to truly put yourself out there, because I don't think if I would have started posting on TikTok, I would be where I am now. Like, it really changed my life, and I never thought I would be on the radio, let alone just like having an online presence. It's a little bit scary at times, but it's just really cool to see how far everything's come in the last 10 years. I didn't realize it's been 10 years, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah, you have almost 500,000 followers across all platforms, and you get like millions of views on like each of your platforms. So how does it feel to have built this like really tight-knit online community around like the Yellow Button?
I think it's just been a really bittersweet feeling just having so many people trust my music taste, just because I feel like everyone's music taste is so personal, and just the fact that there's people who come to the Yellow Button to find music, I'm super honored. And I never thought it would happen. It's just a really nice feeling.
Yeah, what was it like in the beginning of like your live stream days? Was it like, were you messing things up and were you like, oh, should not have said that?
Yeah, I think I was just a lot more nervous and shy when I first started streaming, because there was this thing, gosh, it was probably 3 years ago now, called AMP. I don't know if you've ever heard of AMP, but it was a radio streaming platform through Amazon. So I used to have a little radio show on AMP where it was kind of the same thing as Twitch, where I could just freely talk and it was live. But then going from just sitting behind my phone talking to a camera and it being live and everything was so scary. It took a really long time for me to kind of just get used to talking live and not being so shy. And I feel like it's really helped me come out of my shell and just let me be silly and goofy as much as I want. And it's been really freeing.
What do you think about like the value of music, like curation, music recommendation by an actual human being, as opposed to just kind of taking what the algorithm gives you?
Yeah, I think it's so extremely important. And I'm such a AI hater, and just AI generating your music taste for you or giving you music recommendations, because I feel like what I was just saying, music is such a personal thing to everyone. Like, everyone's music taste is so personal, and just having that human touch to that kind of side of things in your life, I feel like is really important, just because music is like one of the biggest things in my life, and I don't want some kind of robot technology giving me music recommendations when they don't even know who I am, or like, I don't know, it's a strange thought to have, especially the last like 2 years with AI becoming a thing in the music realm. So I just think it's really important to have that source of a real human being able to give you music recommendations.
Kind of with that, like, it seems to me that maybe like the influence of traditional music journalists or earlier gatekeepers has kind of waned. And so people like Anthony Fantano or like you are kind of who people are looking to now. How do you see your like role as a music influencer in today's like landscape?
Kind of like what I was saying earlier. I just feel like I'm one of the sources people can come to find new music or find smaller artists as well. I feel like that's something I've been known for the past few years, is just recommending smaller artists, maybe artists that people might not have been able to come across just because there's so much music out there and it gets overwhelming, and just being that source for people to come to find new music, I feel like is the biggest thing that I like doing for the Yellow Button. And just like honestly talking about music and having open conversations of like, do you like this or do you not like this? What do you like about this? What sounds good about this? And just kind of having that open conversation with people in my community is really fun.
So what is your preferred way to listen to music? I know you talk about like streaming and online platforms, but do you prefer physical media over online platforms?
Yeah, I definitely like both. I have a humongous vinyl collection. I think I have like 150 or more in my collection, and it's just kind of fun to put one on my record player and just listen to it while I'm just sitting on my couch or just hanging out with some friends or anything like that. But also just being able to have music on our phones is just such a nice feeling sometimes, because like I remember back in the day I had a little Zune, if you two remember what a Zune is, but I had a Zune.
I have no idea what a Zune is.
Really?
No.
It was like a iPod Touch, I think, but I think Microsoft made it, I think. But I had a Zune and it only had a select number of songs that I could have on it, and just now having the freedom to listen to literally anything I want is really nice. But then also having physical media I think is important and fun too. So I like a little bit of both.
What was the first record that you ever got, ever purchased?
I think it was a City in Color record.
Okay. Oh, okay, sure.
Oh, I don't remember which one it was. It had a white album cover, but I remember it was City in Color, and I made a YouTube video about it because it was my first one ever.
Nice.
So yeah, probably 10 years ago I got my first one, and it was Bring Me Your Love, maybe, by City in Color.
So say goodbye to love and hold your head.
And so apart from like physical media, do you also like going to like in-person concerts? The only type of concert?
Yeah. I will say the older I've gotten, the less shows I've gone to. Back, honestly, probably 10 years ago, I used to go to so many pop punk and emo shows. Like, I would literally be at probably 2 shows a week. I don't know how I did it. I think it was just being young and having so much free time in my life and just being like, yeah, I'll drive an hour and a half to Chicago to go see this show. Why not? But definitely now I'll probably go to like 2 to 3 shows a year. It's been like, just because I'm also getting older and standing at shows is getting really hard. It sucks, but
What was your most memorable concert?
Oh, that's such a tough question. My most memorable, I think just like back in the day when I used to see this one band I loved, Hot Mulligan.
Okay.
Have you heard of Hot Mulligan?
Yeah.
So scared that you don't want me here in the corner of the living room reading
I don't know, just being in a crowd with people who were such big fans of the artist and just like truly getting into the music, and everyone's just like swaying back and forth with each other and singing right at the singer, and there was like maybe 100 people at these shows, and it was just such a cool experience. But I think one of my other ones was probably a Real Friends and Knuckle Puck show at a bowling alley. I think in Tinley Park, somewhere in Chicago, and the ceilings were so incredibly low, and people were just like throwing each other and stage diving. And I think I was like 17 or 18 at that time, so just experiencing something like that was so crazy and new to me. I'm just like, what is going on? This is so much fun. And I don't think I've experienced a feeling like that since then, but it was just so cool to be there and get to see a show at a bowling alley.
How do you go about finding new music today?
Yeah. I like a lot of deep dives. I like just going on random either YouTube rabbit holes or just going on like a music platform and going through different artists, listening to songs and stuff like that. But also my Twitch stream has become like a huge part of me branching out my music taste as well. Because we do these things called song sharing streams where I just have everyone in my chat kind of recommend songs they've been listening to. And it's like truly been one of the easiest ways to discover new music, because everyone in there has such different music tastes, and just people recommending like pop or R&B or hyperpop or just like anything, like truly anything, and we'll listen to it. So my Twitch stream has been a huge part in the last few years.
Yeah. Any favorite Milwaukee or Wisconsin bands?
I know. So Slow Pulp, if you know Slow Pulp, they were, I guess, from Madison, but now we're in Chicago. But Slow Pulp was really good. Otherwise, I really like Ladybird.
Oh, sure.
You've heard of Lady Bird?
Yeah.
They're a good classic Milwaukee band.
We got sick, can get lost in hell and get anxious at what cost. Time took its time.
I feel like indie rock has had a little like twangy phase lately. What do you think? What do you think it is about that?
I think MJ Linderman and Waxahachie kind of inspired and like made people want to go that route.
Yeah.
Because I feel like last year with MJ's album and just it getting so much recognition, everyone was like, pedal steel.
Hell yeah.
And I was like,
yeah.
yes, we need more pedal steel in the indie rock realm. And like everyone is using it. I'm not sick of it yet.
Yeah.
I'm still all for it. I think it's a cool instrument that I feel like that realm hasn't explored yet at all. So it's just kind of exciting to see.
That was The Yellow Button, a local Twitch streamer and Sirius XM host. She spoke with WUWM's Graham Thomas and Samia Saeed. You can check out their full conversation at WUWM.com or by listening to Milwaukee Based wherever you find your podcasts. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Does your family prefer a real Christmas tree to put the presents under, or do you put up a fake one each year? Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll look at the pros and cons of both options. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.